behind bars. She said, but she did not expect that there will be a recovery program. She had early pregnancy, so she sold drugs together with her boyfriend. She didn't finish her education outside. These stories like this are very common, as what Dr. Baz said. So it starts from our parents, our environment. All these play a role in the choices we make and on the options we see. For instance, Lovely, her father was a drug addict. She has been a drug addict since 13 years old. Even Dr. Golanes knows her. She was a student in our college. And Solay, she was the one who composed and sang the Setli hymn. Her father was a drug addict, so she also went into drugs. In Christian parlance, we call it generational bondage. But we always justify that we are just looking for happiness. The inmates get entangled into this kind of thinking, but we ourselves get entangled in those kinds of thinking too. The inmates and us are just the same. We are susceptible to the same wrong choices. They just got caught, we didn't. So how do you undo something that has been there since childhood? How do you redeem the lost and make them see the way and so change the behavior? Can we convince them to change? There are many behavioral change theories out there. First, we start with B.F. Skinner's learning theories. The idea of B.F. Skinner is that people will imitate a behavior that they see is rewarded, and when it is reinforced, then people will copy it and it becomes more sophisticated. But in B.F. Skinner's theory, people still make an assessment of what they see in others. And in the social learning and social cognitive theory, person thoughts affect behavior. Behavior elicits certain responses from the environment. Environment affects person's development and behavior. And the behavior of a person may change the environment as well as the way as the person thinks. So it still goes through a thought process. You know, we look at our environment and see how we can change it, and that environment also changes our behavior. It still goes through a thought process. That's how behavior is changed. The theory of reasoned action. Behavior depends on how a person assesses the result of a certain action. So personal perception of the action and how he perceives society regards such action, then the person behaves accordingly. In other words, the person still assesses how a certain behavior is looked at, and he assesses how it impacts his society. In other words, there's still thinking going on. We are not a tabula rasa that the environment will just impact us or we will just impact the environment. So all of these kinds of behavioral theories in changing behavior always start with the mind, the thinking. Like for instance, in trans-theoretical or stages of change model, there is pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation for action, action, and maintenance. There is still thinking going on. I have read one of the best books I've ever read, and it says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will." 2,000 years ago, all these sophisticated theories have already been unearthed by the one person I really admire. And he said that it's just to renew the mind. So how do you change behavior? You renew the mind. You renew the worldview. The worldview should be happiness is living within the norms. And it fosters the belief that if I live within the norms, I will live a better life. and not be incarcerated. And you will then value living within the rules and behaving within the norms. So that's our recovery program. The ZBV 4 steps to recovery. Rehabilitation. I hope to move between being lost and being found, from darkness to light, from brokenness to wholeness. Reform. I am willing to change and allow God to change me. Restore. I want a fresh start with others, God and myself. Reconcile. I will seek to renew a right relationship with God and others. So, in education, we equip them mentally and physically. In the recovery program, we equip them, hopefully, God willing, to make the right choices by dealing with their emotional and spiritual sicknesses. Sicknesses that cannot be cured by medicine, ailments that are beyond the reach of human beings. The human mind is very complex. How do you reach out to that part of our being when there are already defense mechanisms in place? How do you crack the shell that they have protected themselves with? How do you renew the mind, changing the worldview? What can we do? Only the person himself and not others can convince himself. Others may try to convince them, but ultimately, the person has to make that decision. But what if the mind has already been fogged through all the years with all the wrong ideas, values, beliefs? How do you make a person unlearn all this? So, from Monday to Friday, the students take their academic classes, but on Saturdays, for 4 hours, we let them go through the ZBV 4 steps to recovery. So the first step is rehabilitation. The first step in recovery is to step out of denial. Recognize the problem. Of course, there is resistance. But through the series of questions that we ask ourselves and our students, we're able to determine what is wrong with our lives. The most difficult examination in the world for me is self-examination. We can only encourage somebody to step out of their denial. We have to model it. That is the importance of leadership in recovery. Being the example yourself. The failure of most recovery programs is it becomes a mental exercise. But when you make it not just a mental exercise, but you yourself, the leader themselves, know the steps and take the steps, model the steps, it requires your whole being to be able to teach and model the steps to your students. We have to live by example, live the recovery ourselves, show our recovery ourselves, because we are also recovering. We are not perfect. So we have this leadership training for our leaders, and it's not just a training that is an intellectual exercise. It is living the recovery. It is very difficult to face one's demons, and stepping out of denial requires your whole being, and is one of the hardest steps. But we have these group discussions. We share our deepest, darkest secrets to each other. We maintain confidentiality. It is of utmost importance. The program will rise and fall on confidentiality. Any breach of confidentiality should be dealt with swiftly and categorically. Any person found guilty of breaching confidentiality is advised to leave the group indefinitely. And there is no fixing. This is not a Bible study. This is not counseling. This is not a religious activity. It is just self-examination and sharing each other's stories, getting support from each other, share a common bond. The second step is reform. I learn, I'm willing to change and allow God to change me. So in this reform step, we take inventory. We deal with our past. The moment you confess what you have done, there is healing, as said in James 5:16. Therefore, confess your sins to each other, person to person, so that you may be healed. Sometimes it's hard to do that because you don't know if the other person will tell your story outside. But there is healing in sharing, and once the group gets the confidence of each other that there is no breach of confidentiality, then the more that they share. Like in the story of April, when she was asked where did she turn, where did she make the wrong turn. In making the inventory, it shows you where you made the wrong turn. So in reform, you know what went wrong. You have a realization. Like for instance, the story of King or Piglet, she realized she got into drugs not because her mother made her do so. It was because of her hatred. So she realized that she went into drugs because of the hatred she had for her mother. But now she said she has forgiven her mother, realizing that each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. It's not because of our environment. Once you realize that it's not because of your environment or not because of your mother or anybody else, but because you decided to take drugs or you decided to commit the crime, that's one step towards recovery. And there is restore. I want a fresh start with others, God and myself. Restore relationships, like one of she doesn't have to destroy her life with the choices that she made. She realized that she just has to make the choice and live the right way. Once you deal with all this, be able to forgive, be able to accept, there is no more use for drugs. There is no more use to do the wrong things. Why is that? It has been said that who has woe, who has sorrow, who has strife, who has complaints, who has needless bruises, who has bloodshot eyes, those who linger over wine, who go sample bowls of mixed wine. Do not gaze at wine when it is red. At the time it was still wine, but now it's shabu, something else, ecstasy maybe. When it sparkles in the cup and when it goes down smoothly. In the end, it bites like a snake and poisons like a viper. Your eyes will see strange sights and your mind will imagine confusing things. You will be like one sleeping on the high seas, lying on top of the rigging. They hit me, you will say, but I'm not hurt. They beat me, but I don't feel it. When will I wake up and so I can find another drink? That's exactly how Piglet or King felt when she was doing those things to herself. Even Pamela, she discovered that she was adopted. Her family is very religious. They're economically stable. But when she learned that she was adopted and how she has behaved to her parents, she didn't like herself and so tattooed herself and went into drugs. She wanted to destroy herself. Hatred is replaced by forgiveness. So there is no more pain, just acceptance and forgiveness. With that, there is no more need to go into those kinds of unwanted behavior. And last, reconcile. I will seek to renew a right relationship with God and others. Because after you overcome all this and realize the wrongs you have done, it is true that you may have changed, but your environment has not. And you have to surround yourself with good people. Because it says in 1 Corinthians 15:33, bad company corrupts good character. In recovery, we have accountability. We are like sisters to each other. We share a common bond. And when you are in the right company, you make the right decisions, you get the right guidance. And mind you, this is a lifelong commitment. Our accountability to each other is not just for 6 months or 18 months. It is lifelong. Because what will happen if you drop those people after the recovery of 8 months or 18 months, this is what will happen to them. you become easy prey. So we have to have that accountability partner and bond together. And this is a lifelong process. You know why? As what Ruth Bell Graham caused to be written on her tombstone. She says, "End of construction. Thank you for your patience." It is only on the day we die that we can truly say that we have recovered. And why do we have to post God in our recovery program? This is why.
There is no solace above or below, only us, small, solitary, striving, battling one another. I pray to myself, for myself.
Because if we rely only on ourselves, that is the very reason why we got into trouble in the first place. Relying on ourselves will get us nowhere. But relying on a higher power, and for us that is God, Jesus Christ, is the solution to the problem. So aside from the recovery program, and dealing with the psychological aspect of it through the 4 years that they will be there, the medical aspect of it, the mental aspect of it, the social aspect of it. This is a holistic program that provides education and rehabilitation. And when the students get out, we have a re-entry program. We will try to place them in jobs. Of course, there's always the stigma, but as like Dr. Vaz will give them our reference, because when they go through the recovery program, we'll be able to discern if they have already changed their views and so their behavior. We cannot do this alone. We need the government, we need the NGO, we need everyone to help us. So let us unite and say that education, not incarceration. Thank you.